Arjun was 26 when his world quietly collapsed. There was no single disaster, no dramatic ending. It was smaller than that, and worse. His startup had folded after 2 years of sleepless work. The woman he had planned to marry had walked away 6 months before the wedding. And his father, the man who had taught him everything, had been buried the previous winter under a sky the color of tin. For weeks he told everyone. He spoke about his failures at coffee shops, at dinners, at every reunion he could not politely skip. He believed that if he could just make people understand, the weight would lighten. Instead, the weight multiplied. He noticed the small smiles that curled at the corners of certain mouths. He noticed how quickly some old friends stopped returning his messages. He noticed a cousin repeating his private confession to relatives at a wedding, dressed up as concern. That was the first thing he learned. Pain, when handed out freely, does not always come back as comfort. Sometimes it comes back as gossip. Sometimes it comes back as pity that tastes like poison. He decided quietly to stop bleeding in public. He would still feel everything. He would just stop offering it as entertainment. He began writing instead. A cheap notebook, a pen with a chewed cap. Every morning before the city woke, he sat by his window and wrote what he could not say aloud. Slowly, the storm inside him found a place to sit down. He began to understand something his father used to mumble while pruning the mango tree in their old courtyard. A tree that shows every wound, the old man had said, does not live long. The second thing arrived through his mother. She had been leaning on Arjun for everything since his father's death. Decisions about the house, the bills, the arguments with the neighbors. He did not resent her for it. He loved her. But there came an afternoon when he had to travel for a job interview in another city, and he watched her sit at the kitchen table, paralyzed by a simple electricity notice. Her hands trembled over the paper, as if it were written in a language of fire. He realized with a soft grief that he had done this to her, not out of malice, out of love. He had made himself so available that she had stopped believing in her own hands. That evening he sat beside her and read the notice aloud. Then he taught her how to pay it online. She fought him. She cried. She said she was too old. He held her fingers over the phone screen anyway. The next month she paid it herself and called him only to boast. She sounded 20 years younger. He understood then that leaning is not the same as living. A shoulder is a gift, but a crutch is a cage. He began pulling back from the small rescues he had been performing for others, and he began asking himself which of his own problems he had been outsourcing to friends, to luck, to his father's fading memory. He started solving them one at a time, badly at first, then better. The third lesson came dressed as a friend. His name was Rohit, a college classmate with a laugh that could fill a room. Rohit called often, always in some crisis, a rent shortfall, a breakup, a hangover that required company. Arjun always answered. He drove across the city at midnight, lent money that came back in fragments or not at all, missed meals, missed sleep, missed the small precious hours he had begun to reserve for his own healing. One evening Arjun was preparing for the biggest presentation of his new career, and Rohit called with another minor emergency. Arjun said no. He said it kindly, but he said it. Rohit went cold. Within a week, mutual friends were relaying stories about how Arjun had changed, how success had made him selfish, how he was not the same warm boy from the hostile days. Arjun sat with that pain for many nights, and then he understood. He had not become selfish. He had become visible to himself. His kindness had not disappeared. It had simply stopped being unlimited. And the people who mourned that limit the loudest were the ones who had benefited most from its absence. Real kindness, he saw, has a spine. Without a spine, it becomes a doormat, and a doormat teaches every visitor how to wipe their feet on you. The fourth lesson came slowly over the course of a year. He noticed a pattern. He was always the one calling, always the one suggesting the meeting, always the one remembering birthdays. He stopped, not out of anger, just to see what would happen. Most of his phone went silent. It hurt more than he expected and less than he feared. But a few people did call. A quiet colleague named Mira, an old professor, a neighbor who used to walk with his father in the evenings. These were the people who had been choosing him all along, and he had been too busy chasing shadows to notice. He watered these friendships now with careful attention, and they grew into something he had not known was possible, a small circle of humans who did not require performance from him. He learned that love without effort from the other side is not love. It is a mirror you polish for someone who never looks into it. Better to have 3 real windows than 100 blank walls. The fifth lesson was the hardest, because it demanded that he swallow his own defense. A rumor had spread at his new company, something twisted about a project he had led. He knew the truth. He had all the emails, all the receipts, all the proof. He wanted to march into every office and lay it out on the table like a lawyer at trial. But an older colleague, a woman named Sushma who had watched 30 years of office politics, pulled him aside. Some fires you put out, she said, and some fires you let burn themselves. The people who matter will see. The people who do not, will not, no matter how many buckets of water you carry. He hated the advice. He wanted to be understood. He wanted his name to sound clean in every mouth, but he tried her way. He said nothing. He simply kept working, kept delivering, kept showing up. Within 4 months, the rumor died of neglect. The people who had believed it looked foolish. The people who had doubted him quietly began to trust him more. He learned that explanations are often bricks handed to people who only wanted to throw stones. And silence, when your conscience is clean, is not weakness. It is a locked door with the key in your own pocket. The sixth lesson found him in a doctor's office. He had ignored the headaches for months, the tightness in his chest, the sleep that came in shallow puddles instead of deep pools. The doctor was gentle but firm. Your body has been sending you letters, she said. You have not been opening them. He walked home along the river that evening and made a promise to himself. He began waking earlier, not to work more, but to walk. He started cooking simple meals instead of ordering from apps. He put his phone in another room at night. He stopped consuming news that only fed him rage. He read books that made him quieter inside. Slowly, the tightness in his chest loosened. Slowly, his sleep deepened. Slowly, he began to feel like a home he wanted to live in. He understood that no career, no relationship, no dream could survive on a mind that had been fed poison and a body that had been abandoned. His father had died young. His father had also worked 7 days a week, eaten what was fastest, and swallowed every stress. Arjun did not want that ending. He would honor his father by not repeating his last chapter. The seventh lesson came the day his new venture began to succeed. Small at first, then noticeable. People started asking about his plans. Cousins who had ignored him for years called with careful curiosity. Old acquaintances wanted meetings. He noticed how quickly the questions turned specific. What was his next move? What were his numbers? Who were his clients? He remembered his father again, standing in the courtyard with his hands full of mango leaves. Never announce the harvest before it ripens, the old man had said. Birds hear well. Arjun learned to speak less about what he was building. He shared his real plans with only 2 or 3 people whose loyalty had been tested by years, not weekends. To everyone else, he offered warmth without blueprints. He stopped posting his goals online. He stopped explaining his strategy at gatherings. He simply worked quietly and let the results introduce themselves. He noticed that his focus sharpened almost immediately. Without the pressure of 100 watchers, he could think. A year passed, then another. The Arjun who used to bleed in coffee shops was gone. In his place stood someone his own mother sometimes looked at with a soft, surprised pride. He was not louder. He was not richer than he needed to be. He had not become one of those men who post their success in bright colors. He had become something older, something the world does not always celebrate but always secretly respects. He had become still. One evening, his younger cousin visited, 17 years old, wounded by a friend group that had cast him out. The boy sat on Arjun's balcony and asked how he was supposed to become strong. Arjun thought for a long time before answering. He looked out at the city he had once tried to impress. Then he spoke slowly, the way his father used to speak when the words mattered. Keep your pain private, he said, not because you are ashamed of it, because it is yours and not everyone knows how to hold something precious without breaking it. Stand on your own feet. Ask for help when you need it, but never build a life that falls apart the moment someone lets go of your hand. Be kind, but not endless. Kindness without limits stops being a gift and becomes a permission slip for other people to take from you. Choose the ones who choose you. Stop chasing anyone who forgets your name when they no longer need you. Let the world misunderstand you. You do not have time to explain your soul to people who never plan to read it carefully. Guard your mind and your body. They are the only 2 things you will carry from the first day of your life to the last. Nothing else stays. And never hand your truth to anyone who has not earned it. Your dreams, your plans, your quiet vision, these are seeds. Seeds do not grow in daylight. They grow in the dark, in the soil, in the silence. The boy was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Is that all?" Arjun smiled, the small smile of a man who had learned everything the slow way. "That is enough," he said. "That is a life." Outside, the city kept moving, loud and hungry and forgetful. Inside, on that small balcony, something